It's a nation attacking its neighbour with a leader accused of war crimes, but Russia is still being allowed to take over its role on the rotating presidency of the United Nations Security Council for this month. It's causing fury in Ukraine, with its president, Volodymyr Zelensky, calling it an absurd and destructive move. University of Otago's Professor Robert Patman is with us this morning with his analysis. Some people, Professor Patman, good morning, would say that this is a bit of a farce, the United Nations and its ability to come down on Russia for attacking Ukraine. This would make it even more so, would it not, that Russia is able to take the chair this month?
Yes, I think it highlights the dysfunctionality of the UN Security Council. It should be recalled for our viewers that Russia was chairing the UN Security Council back in February 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine. And now we have a situation where it's taking on, as part of the rotation amongst the 15 Security Council members, it's taking its turn to chair it. And of course, Ukraine is incensed by that because Russia has broken every rule in the book and basically torn up the UN Charter, and so it's naturally very concerned about this. The US said there's no legal way, no legal procedure it can block this, but it does raise serious questions on how long we can go on with the veto system in the UN Security Council, where you have five permanent members who can block anything they don't like, which of course means that some of the world's worst problems, including Ukraine, do not always get the attention they deserve.
Professor Patman, do you think this is going to be a case while Russia is the chair of the Council? Is this going to be a case of Russia using that veto to block anything the Council tries to do for the next wee while? Or is it more so, like you just mentioned before, that Russia will take this opportunity to move on Ukraine in another way, like we saw them launch that invasion last time?
I wouldn't draw quite the same connection, but put it this way, Russia will use its position as chair for a month of the UN Security Council to set the agenda at a critical time, not just in what's happening in the Ukraine, but elsewhere in the world. And many people believe that Russia's own behavior has forfeited the right for it to hold such a prestigious position. It also raises questions on how long countries like the UK, France and the United States are going to persist in adhering to the UN security veto, because from New Zealand's point of view, it's redundant and has been so for a long time. We've always opposed the use of the veto. And I think President Zelensky has made it quite clear that he's going to resume, when the conflict is over in Ukraine, he's going to resume a campaign to have a significant reform of the UN Security Council. I think New Zealand will be supporting Ukraine in that effort.
Yeah, we did see last year at the UNGA, Jacinda Ardern, then the New Zealand Prime Minister, coming out quite strongly on the veto. But the problem is, one country giving up the veto means all of them give up the veto, right? And I know that the US is also toying with this idea, but is it realistic that these countries will also want to give up the veto and forcing Russia to give up the veto?
I don't think any of them want to give up the veto. But the price the world is paying for five countries having a privilege that no other country, no other member of the UN has, is colossal. Many of the problems facing states are simply too big, even for superpowers, to fix. And that's the problem, because the veto system was introduced back in the post-war period to ensure that great powers remained in the United Nations so they could help fix the world's problems. But the problem is, in the 21st century, the world's problems now defy resolution by one superpower, even two: climate change, the pandemic, transnational terrorism, problems of a global, expanded global economy. None of these problems can be fixed individually by states. They need international cooperation. And so, in a sense, the veto has become an impediment to that process.
Professor Patman, just quickly, we've seen Anaya Mahuta off to Brussels for the NATO meeting. Obviously, Ukraine, I expect, would be on the agenda there for discussion.
Yes, I think that's this is following up from the Prime Minister's visit to the NATO summit last year. We are an informal partner in NATO, and I think there's going to be discussions about how we can continue that process. We have a lot at stake as a small country which depends on the international rules-based order. We have a lot at stake. with regard to the situation in Ukraine. If Mr. Putin was to succeed and establish the principle that might can be right, that would have reverberations for us as a small global trader around the world that depends on a rules-based system. So I think these consultations with NATO are timely and welcome. And I also think the foreign minister will take the chance to consolidate the links that it has, the government has made through the free trade agreement with the EU. We should remember that many members of the NATO are also members of the EU as well.
Well, we look forward to seeing the outcome. Professor Robert Patman, thank you very much for your time this morning.